All right, Wiz, and we're back. More MCP. So is MCP just a REST API or no?
No, it's not just a REST API. That's for sure.
Okay. But we can deploy MCP servers to REST APIs. Is that right?
We can deploy them all over the place. Yes, as many things.
So we're going to cover AnyMCP, a new tool from Arcee today. Is that kind of just a REST API though?
I'm not going to say it's. I'm not going to say it's just anything. It's a MCP serving solution.
Okay. But MCP itself is definitely not just a REST API.
That's correct. All
right. Is everybody super clear on this? We're going to get into it today and talk more about MCP, AnyMCP, servers, REST APIs, and more. And Wiz, I'm really excited to invite some special guests we have today from Arcee to chat with us today up to the stage. First off, Lucas Atkins, welcome back, my friend. Research lead at Arcee. Maybe that title has changed since we last spoke. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and then we've also got a really new special guest, Abhishek Thakur, a new member of the team at Arcee here. The claim to fame, Abhishek, I believe, is the world's first 4x Kaggle Grandmaster. That's a throwback right there for the industry. You came from Hugging Face. You're in Arcee, and you kind of drove the actual engineering behind AnyMCP, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, it was an idea from another colleague of ours, Fernando, and I took it from there, and me and some other guys, we worked really hard to bring this to everyone.
Love it. So we met Fernando on the last couple of events. Can you guys tell us, maybe give us a little bit background context here, Lucas, how this came about, what the kind of origin story of AnyMCP is, and then maybe we can get a little technical detail here in the beginning from Abhishek.
Yeah, it came from, MCP is not, it is technically new if you're counting the average life cycles, but in the AI world, it is not particularly new. It came out I don't remember, it was October, November last year from a spec from Anthropic. And it didn't really start taking off until probably February and March. I'd say March is when it kind of hit its peak as far as people getting really excited about it, because you had some more robust solutions. You had a lot of clients that you were able to, like VS Code, Cursor, Windsurf. They all added MCP support, so people were actually able to start using it. And when I say we, I mean Fernando, who's kind of, you could think of him as, the brain. He's very much a research scientist. He's very much like the brains behind a lot of what we do from a theoretical standpoint. He was a little bit frustrated with how cumbersome MCP was. Like, you had to run the server locally, and then it could only connect to like native applications you had. So the Claude Desktop app, again, VS Code, Cursor, you could use it there, but if you were trying to use it anywhere else, or you needed, especially when we were trying to add it to some of our web-based applications, it became very difficult. And he built out kind of an internal prototype, if you will, for how can we orchestrate these and like host them in Docker containers, and then deploy them via a more standardized, not the way you would do it with VS Code. And then when he finally was pretty pleased with it, Abhishek got super excited about it, and it kind of became something that the team put together over the course of like a week. It came together very, very quickly. So
yeah. So Abhishek, how did you come to learn about what Fernando had been doing, and why did you decide to pick it up and run with it?
Working at Arcee, people share what they have been working on, and there are discussions. So I was talking to Fernando about something else, and he had this idea about MCP, and he built some really nice agents, and that's what I like to showcase in most of my social media posts about AnyMCP, the OpenBNB server. So based on that, and he had some other really cool agents built on top of it. And I was thinking, like, he also had this issue where he could not access those servers because these are STDIO servers, right? And you have to run them locally. So wouldn't it be cool to have them run anywhere you want, and you don't have to provide credentials all the time? So you set it up once and you're done. So that's where the whole idea came from, and then we said, okay, yeah, let's build something like that, and where people can just deploy any MCP servers they want, and they can use it from anywhere in the world.
So critically, though, the idea came about, and you guys were like, "Let's build it," and you sort of led this. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where the nuts and bolts come in. It's always the hard part. Kind of ideas are a dime a dozen, executions everything, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
and I love the modesty, guys. Okay, you built something, you spun it up real quick. This is exactly what we're all about here at AI Makerspace: building, shipping, and sharing. You guys have been doing it like legends here for a long time. Lucas, you've been on a number of times, and this is the latest from Arcee. So we're excited to dive in and get into a lot more detail today. Wiz, we heard STDIO. We're hearing a lot of the details under the hood here that that maybe people don't know about. Maybe we can give them some context on today as we talk more about any model context protocol.
I think we could definitely introduce some context to their models today, thinking
That's
models
right.
today. Yeah.
In the right way, just the right way. All right, guys, we'll see you back on in just a little bit. We're going to go ahead and kick off the event and introduce AnyMCP. If you have questions along the way, we're going to be chatting with Lucas, with Abhishek, and of course, Wiz and I are here. Just smash the YouTube live chat today. We're going to go straight into looking at questions as we're having a discussion. We'd love to hear you guys' feedback, you guys' comments, you guys' questions along the way. We're going to talk about how we can actually use this tool now to deploy public MCP servers. You heard a little bit about the friction. You heard a little bit about the background. Let's talk about how all this really comes together. I know MCP is one of the oft misunderstood concepts in the industry, as old as it may be, coming out in November 2024. Today, we want to kind of align ourselves to really just a quick recap of MCP for those of you that are already a little bit confused by some of the discussions we had. And then this idea of any MCP that Arcee came out with. Is this idea really novel? Is there a specific problem that this is solving? Can we really articulate this very, very well so we get this broader understanding of how MCP could potentially be a little bit more useful, especially for folks that are maybe not as advanced and more of a beginner along the AI engineer path than some of the people that we have on today? Where should you use AnyMCP? How should you use it? And how can we actually use it today? Also, how do we expect to be able to use it tomorrow as the feature set grows, as the security grows, as it becomes a more and more robust tool from Arcee? So let's talk about MCP, and then we'll talk more also about MCP versus REST APIs. This is a common back and forth we're seeing in the industry. A lot of people talking about it's just a REST API. It's not a REST API. It's way different. It's the same. What's really going on? The opinions are mixed, but we do have some experts here. We're going to try to get to the bottom of it. We'll talk about the tool. We'll have a demo from the Wiz. Should be kind of a good one, and you'll kind of see exactly what we can do today. We'll also talk about a special use case that we've identified at AI Makerspace that we really like. So MCP, we did an event on this recently, but just in broad strokes, if you look at the top level, it helps you build agents and complex workflows. Okay, great. How exactly? Well, it provides all of these things. Those are wonderful. And at the end of the day, it's a protocol. Okay, it's a set of rules. It's a standardized procedure. It's a way that we can engage with tools to get the right stuff in context. And we can sort of really make this kind of broad kind of interpretation where it's this standardized set of rules for putting the right stuff into the model's context window. It's kind of really is that simple, but there's a lot of details under the hood where they really kind of do matter, especially as we get into the application building and setting up these servers for yourself, for your applications, for your company. So this is from the original blog post, and it's important to sort of see the breadth and scope of this if you're not familiar with it at a detailed level. A new standard for connecting the systems where data lives, including, check this out, content repositories, business tools, development environments. This is a huge scope instantly, okay? These are all sort of big things. And we're going to specifically focus on a business tool today in the demo, but we're also going to talk about a development environment application that's kind of a content repository for AI Makerspace that we're pretty excited about. It's also kind of this idea of putting the right stuff in context, better, more relevant responses. This is sort of marketing speak. Can we get down to the juice here? What are we getting out of this if we really squeeze it? What can we kind of understand? We want to get away from these custom implementations. And as we'll see, AnyMCP kind of allows us to get further away from something that feels more custom to actually make it usable. And so we're seeing this kind of streamlining and this sort of next layer of abstraction pattern over and over again in the industry as tools come out and as standards and protocols come out today. So when they released this, 3 major components, the protocol itself, the local MCP server support in the Claude Desktop app. We're going to come back to this because this is still a good entry point for even understanding something like AnyMCP, and then an open source repository of MCP servers. So this local piece is really important when you think about what the role of something like AnyMCP is. So first off, Wiz, I'd like to bring you up for this quick discussion. In the context of kind of IDEs, content repositories, we've actually thought of an MCP use case we want to roll out for our next cohort of the AI Engineering Bootcamp. Can you tell us a little bit about how it kind of maybe combines multiple data sources, better responses, and a standard dev environment?
Yeah, I mean, basically what we want to do is, we know that we know exactly and ahead of time the docs, the versions of tools we're going to use for our cohort, so people don't run into, let's call them, fun issues, right? When they're setting things up, the AI space moves too quickly, so oftentimes we have to lock versions, right? But that means we know exactly the version of the docs we need to point to. We know exactly the versions of the tools we're going to use, and so it would be very handy if we expose an MCP server that all of the students and users can just point to when they're asking questions in Cursor about how to do something with this tool. They're going to be able to leverage the information behind that MCP server. And that's something very, classic. It's version docs for everybody. They don't have to do the indexing on their side. We get to do it for them. And it just makes it very easy to have that kind of, personalized RAG or cohort level personalized RAG, that they can just use and get the correct documentation back. Which is super useful. And I think, I understand why MCP is valuable there.
Yeah, okay. So there's this curation thing that we're doing behind the server in this case, and we're sort of exposing nothing but the good stuff, the highly curated kind of material to be searched, so that when people ask questions, they sort of query the little helper AI assistant coding bot within Cursor. They can get back very, very specific, very, very reference-oriented information that we know is going to align with what they're working on. So we can kind of control the environment a little bit. We can curate the right stuff. And we can expose it to our users in a way that is super valuable to them and makes it actually easier for them to interact with our tool and our product. Something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And it lets us, make updates on our end, and they don't have to do anything. They continue to point at that MCP server. They continue to get that information that's as up to date as it can be. And I think that's really the big news, right? Which is we get this we get the ability to make sure they have access to exactly what we need them to without them needing to, okay, there's a version update, do this thing, or like, okay, point at the new, repo, yada, yada. And I think that just is a invaluable tool.
Okay, yeah. So we've got this nice pattern that we can think of then, curating stuff, exposing it just to our users so they can get exactly what they want and nothing more. Perhaps we'll see this come back into play when we talk about use cases for any MCP with the rest of the team. Thanks, Wiz. Let's keep it moving. We are going to talk a little bit about the MCP kind of protocol spec for just a moment. And there's a couple reasons for this. You can read all the marketing materials, whether you're building an AI-powered IDE, like we just talked about, enhancing a chat interface. We also just talked about that. Or creating custom AI workflows, standardized way. Okay, great. But what I want to focus in on here is kind of the architecture. And notice again that, yes, we have this client-server architecture where the host can connect to multiple servers. And we can also notice that this piece right here, that's your computer. Again, we can sort of start thinking locally, especially from the basic kind of foundational MCP context. And we can also note that like the point of MCP is that we kind of are able to have an input and an output. We have a specific message format that's associated with another protocol, this idea of JSON RPC. And MCP then returns an MCP compatible response to the client. You see these arrows are sort of directed back to the client. And so what we're going to do when we sort of get a response back is we're going to kind of resolve that response into something that we can put in context. It could be natural language text. It doesn't have to be. But we want to basically get stuff back that we can put into the context window. And we want it to be useful. We want it to be a standardized way of doing this. And if we zoom in and look closely here, you'll also see sort of that we can have like APIs connected on the back end there of MCP servers. And so it brings up this interesting point and this interesting discussion about MCP versus APIs. And this was a great article that came out just this past weekend called MCP is not REST API. And the idea is like many common implementations simply create an MCP wrapper over existing API services. This is a suboptimal design choice. There's a lot of technical detail here. Trying to force one paradigm onto another is generally not good. And ultimately, this kind of approach might hinder an agent's ability to effectively use its tools, which is the opposite of what MCP was designed to do. So I got on Grok today and I did some deep search and I said, like, what are people saying about this idea that MCP is basically REST APIs, MCP is similar to REST APIs. And it's really this active discussion in the community right now, where we have the experts here to get to the bottom of it. Likely MCP is designed for AI with capabilities beyond REST API. Indications are that it's more than that, but opinions do differ. And so when we sort of ask ourselves, like, is it just a REST API? Does it use REST APIs? But we're also deploying it to REST APIs today. It's important to get these things straight. And so I want to bring everybody back up to sort of have a discussion here about like, how should we think about differentiating between MCP and REST APIs? So let's go ahead and get Wiz and Lucas and Abhishek back up to kind of discuss like, how should we think about differentiating these two? Like, I want to start with you, Abhishek. How do you think about this? And how can you offer the audience and aspiring AI engineers an easy way to think about differentiating between these two things?
Ooh. I think my views on MCP are a little bit different, but I do believe like it's an API for APIs. But REST API, I think.
So MCP is an API for APIs. I love this. Okay. Let's get this discussion rolling then. Do you have anything else you'd like to add, or you
Yeah,
want to?
so like MCP servers, the protocol offers tools and resources. So far, we have seen a lot of use from the tools part, and the tools part can easily be converted to APIs. So, but MCP is on the rise, and a lot of people love using MCP server because it makes their lives easy. Uh, the resources part is something that I have more interest in, and I would like to see more MCP servers where you have multiple resources, and you can build agents that communicates with those resources and uses the tools that you have. Then it becomes more interesting, at least for me, in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah, as a senior research engineer. Okay, Lucas, jump in on this. Like, how do you think about this? What do you think about this discussion that's happening out there?
I think that the key thing being discussed around like, oh, is it just a REST API? How is it different than standard tool use that you do with like an OpenAI compatible API? I think that's somewhat missing the overall point of MCP, because if you think back, like say MCP wasn't created, like they never announced that, there was never any spec released. Companies weren't making tool use easy for their products. You had to kind of, as this meme suggests, you had to go, and if you wanted to make an MCP for linear to help you manage PRs and issues, you had to go and find what they had available via their API and code it yourself. And it was a lot of, it was never optimal because you don't know all the intricacies of that company. Whereas now with MCP, you see a tremendous number of companies, both AI native companies and those aren't, are creating and managing their own MCP servers. GitHub is managing their own MCP server. Salesforce, HubSpot, Linear. I mean, they're all making officially, first-party sanctioned servers, which is a tremendously net benefit to the AI engineering and just the overall industry at large. Because then, if I'm wanting to connect my model to, again, Linear, for example, I know that I'm getting the best possible, experience because they built it. The people who built those APIs internally that are, that you would normally call via a REST API are building MCP and making it very easy. So I think regardless of whether or not it is, the spec is very important because it gives everyone a singular structure to work in, and that allows companies to build stuff that they know their end users will be able to kind of integrate.
Okay.
I think like one thing that I would like to add, like one difference that I see is mostly context aware interaction between the LLM agents or LLM itself and the tools. So that's something that I feel like that's what makes it different from a REST API, although it can use RESTful communication.
Context aware interaction between
and it's also dynamic in nature. So
okay. So the audience here wants you to double click in on something here, Abhishek. So Marco asks, could you talk through an example of an MCP server that uses only a tool component versus one that uses a tool plus a resource? Is the question clear? I don't know.
Yeah. The question is clear, but I mean, for tool use, like most of them, most of the available MCP servers that I've seen have tools. Tool plus resource. I think I had a couple of examples, but I cannot remember right now. But let me find it, and I'll come back to you in this chat later.
Okay. So Wiz. So yeah, go ahead, Lucas. What do you got?
No, I was just gonna say that there are some there's one I really like called Taskmaster, which that one does use resources. That's where you call the tool, the model in like your VS Code, it sends a request out of, hey, this is what the user's trying to build. And then it has it then makes API calls like Anthropic and others to then build out like a PRD and then an integration guide. And then the model is then forced throughout the conversation to update that, follow that task, If it needs to reset its context, it automatically summarizes, knows where it picked up. That's an awesome example of tools and resources. But there's also, if I'm looking at, again, linear, right now, all that one does is it just gives you access to tools like update issue, create issue. There's not a lot of, it doesn't inherently change the way that the model is, that you are interacting with the model.
Okay. So Wiz, let's try to tie some of this together. So we got an API for APIs from Abhishek. That's a great one-liner there. And we're still sort of relying on this MCP server to expose an API. This question from Mr. Hillsman in the chat. But it's not the same thing. Can you walk us through the way that you think about this, tie some of these pieces together?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's like this, there's this very sticky wording that we're stuck in, right? Which is this idea of like, so API is different than REST, right? So REST is the way we think about interacting with our API. And I really like the basic explanation provided in a blog by a guy called Han, which talks about how, REST expects us to interact with these very specific set of verbs, right? Get, post. This is classic REST stuff, right? Whereas when we're thinking about more expansive APIs, we want to have a larger pool of verbs that we can interact with. And we don't want to just think of our MCP, APIs as a way to interact with data, right? Which is largely what REST is for. It's interacting with some data model behind the scenes, right? You're getting things, you're updating, you're patching these things. It's less focused on the actual, doing component. And I think that's the main difference. But again, we're in like the quibbliest of language here. We're not in like broadly useful delineations. The idea is that the way we think about MCP isn't just like update this record, fetch this thing associated with the user ID. You know what I mean? That's a limiting way to think about or even build MCP. And we don't want to just wrap REST APIs, right, with our MCP servers. We like them to do much more, and they can do and do much more, as you'll see, and as people build, and as Lucas and Abhishek have both already given us plenty of examples of tools that are more than just like, here's some record, update it, here's some, fetch some piece of information, like that's dope, and we still got to do that, but like that's not what MCP is.
Yeah. I'm struck by the context awareness that Abhishek was talking about. This idea that like maybe you are just fetching and doing something, but you're doing it in a way that you're sort of aware of the context in which you're doing it. Is that a good way of thinking about the difference? Or you guys?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, if you think about the problems that MCP is trying to solve as a protocol, maybe not, right? That's
sure.
MCP as a protocol itself is not uniquely situated to answer this question, but the way we want to think about designing servers or tools that LLMs can use is certainly, more expansive than your simple stateless REST API. We want to be able to understand the context we live in. We want, Lucas, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that this also brings up an interesting point for people who are building and training models, that you have to train them in a way to utilize these MCP servers in a context-aware way. It's very clear Claude was. I almost guarantee that part of Claude Sonnet's training was an RL environment where it was given access to a bunch of MCP servers and given an end goal, and through that it had to make its way through. It's very good at having 4 or 5 tools available and then using them in parallel or sequentially. The newest Gemini, the update they did on the beginning of May, is also good at that now. It wasn't before. It kind of got lost with MCP tools because it didn't know the spec. And I imagine the newer OpenAI models are going to follow that as well. So it's not as simple as I train a model, I give it access to MCP, and it goes off to the races. Like, these models have to be trained to use them, and I think that's both exciting and a little bit daunting when it comes to, hey, I need to make a specialized model that can use this MCP tool. The way you train the model changes drastically.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got sort of a lot of different sort of directions that we've headed in this particular thing. I like the sort of, it's kind of an API for APIs. It kind of allows us to be a little bit more of a context-aware API. It's not the whole broad scope of MCP that we're covering here, but it's sort of a way that we could differentiate between MCP and kind of a REST API. Is everybody kind of comfortable with that explanation? More or less? Want to add anything to it?
Yeah.
Okay. There's just so many use cases because it's such a broad thing that we just have this, it's a new standard, it's this new protocol, it's this generic set of rules for an infinity of use cases. So it's kind of hard to get the golden thread through. So we are going to come back.
I really want to just like focus one more time at there's this very important distinction between the protocol MCP, right? So model context protocol, and then the things we build that adhere to that context protocol, right?
Yeah.
The things that we're doing, the way we're building these servers, et cetera, right? They're facilitated through MCP, but we're having still to design those things. We're having still to build the tooling that leverages this protocol. And so these systems are in some way separated a little bit, where, you know, MCP is the conduit through which we can do these awesome things. It's not like the thing that does it.
Yeah.
To Lucas's point, the model having understanding allows us to, understanding meaning having been in some way trained to work with MCP, you know, allows us to build more complex things, right? Because it gets the protocol, it knows the handshake better, right? But there's no, the actual behind the scenes is still, you know, human ingenuity. We're still building these servers. We're still tacking things together. It's just that the way the model gets to communicate with it is known, and that lets us do more fancy, complicated stuff without everything burning, right?
Yeah. Lucas, that's super meta. You always bring the super meta stuff to the, okay, we're going to train the models to know how to do MCP now, just like we could sort of tell them, hey, can you output a function so we can call a function? In exactly the same way, we could sort of fine tune a model to engage with MCP servers. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, they're very, I mean, if you train a really good model that uses like OpenAI compatible tool use, there's a good chance there's going to be quite a bit of crossover, like generalization to also do MCP. But the way that you call those tools within MCP, like when it's connected to an MCP server, is different than OpenAI spec. So if your goal is for it to be really good at MCP, which I think everyone is kind of going towards, you have to convert those into MCP calls.
All right. And full circle, Abhishek, I mean, really you were interested in building agents with access to tools. MCP comes up. And fundamentally, to your point, was like, it's about building these applications, these agents with access to tools that do things we think are useful. Where MCP can help, maybe we use it. Where MCP can't help, maybe we don't. What's the last word, Abhishek, on this note?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you've summarized it well, so I don't have anything to add here. I mean, I just want to say, like, I do agree, like, it's not just a REST API, but the difference can only be seen by experts. Let's say the end user is probably going to think it's probably just a REST API. However, it's not. But one thing that I want to like also ask you guys, do you think like any model which is trained to do tool use can access these MCP servers and use the tools and resources, or is it like just is it some kind of specific training for these kind of LLMs?
Yeah, they can, but to get truly, I think Claude is probably the golden example of a model that utilizes them very, very well. To get them to work well, if you're just calling the MCP, you do need to do some specialized training. Now, there's some nuance there because there's a lot of like Open Web UI and a few others. Like if you give them an MCP tool, they like an MCP server, they convert those tools into OpenAI compatible spec. And then
that's how most of the people are doing it right now.
Yeah. So when you're doing it that way, yeah, sure. Again, long horizon use of these over 200,000 tokens, that's not solved. I would argue that's not even solved by Claude and the others. But yeah, if it's just like, let's convert it to an OpenAI spec, call it that way. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, guys, this has been a heck of a discussion. If anybody in the audience has this whole thing wrapped up, we'd love for you to smash the comments after and give us a little overview of where we just went and came back to. So I love it. Way to open it up, Abhishek, and close it out. Let's get into AnyMCP now. We'll take a look at the demo, and Wiz, we'll see you back to show us how it's done in just a moment here. So all that is to say, what's AnyMCP? Well, it's a way that we can, if we look at the marketing materials, manage your MCP endpoints and configs in one central platform. Sounds dope. How should we think about it? Well, the easy way to think about it is it's just a one-click deployment for any open source or your own custom-built MCP server. So we can do one-click deploy for MCP servers now. We are living in the future, guys. And this is free, 100% free right now. This is a new tool from Arcee. Play with it while it's free. Play with it while you can contribute to it. Play with it while it's hot and fresh, and you should be able to definitely make an impact. Especially all you out there looking to contribute to potential open source projects. This is a great one to start looking at and start thinking about and start seeing how you might play with it and maybe find some bugs and share them with people like Abhishek and Lucas, and help them improve the latest tooling at the edge. Another way I like to think about this, and we covered this tool a couple of weeks ago, is it's kind of like Vercel for MCP servers. It's kind of like this easy one-click deploy thing. We saw this, that Vercel kind of allows us to do the app hosting, the front end and the back end. And we saw this in the simple app build that we did in the AI Engineer Challenge. Check out that event for a little bit more detail on that. But this idea of like hosting and giving us kind of exposing, we can kind of see and interact with it on the front, and we can kind of have it hosted somewhere on the back. That's kind of what AnyMCP is doing. And so, there's a couple ways that we can think about using it. The first one is we can do it the way MCP servers have been built up so far to date. We can prototype them locally, and then we can basically start exposing them more broadly in a remotely accessible public URL kind of situation to either internal folks or external folks, depending on our use case and the sensitivity of the things that we're doing. Also, and this is kind of a cool, super quick way to use it. If you're not actually doing the one-click deployment, if you're not actually doing the local development yourself, you can just use any MCP server that you can find, and then you can kind of set it up to give anybody access to it. So you're kind of doing the heavy lifting of finding a useful MCP server and then deploying it, but then you're allowing anybody else to kind of use it. You can see how this ecosystem might grow in time. We'll talk about use cases after the demo here with the rest of the squad, but we want to kind of get right into the meat of how to actually use this tool now. And again, it's a standard, a protocol, MCP, for connecting assistants to where data lives. And we're going to look at a business tool use case. We're going to look at doing stuff kind of locally at first here. Remember, we're going to do stuff on kind of our own computer. And this is kind of the classic MCP approach. And we're going to use Claude Desktop, as we saw, is kind of one of the initial things they enabled MCP servers on. This is just what we can read from the Claude Desktop marketing materials. Always there when you need it. Sits quietly, perhaps a little creepily in your workflow, note tab hopping required. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add some memory to Claude Desktop. We're going to create an MCP server that just does that. It's quite simple, the idea, and we've probably all seen, whether we use ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or any of these LLMs, when we add memory, we can start to have more interesting conversations. It'll be personalized in remembering details and preferences. We can be a little bit more productive because we don't have to share the same context over and over. We can support ongoing projects better, reduce a little bit more friction, and it's just a little bit stickier, And so if you're trying to get people to use this kind of thing, this is something that that is going to benefit any application, is a little bit of memory of its users. So I want to go ahead and head over to the Wiz to show us exactly how to add memory in the demo by spinning up a custom MCP server and getting it deployed to any MCP, showing us how it works exactly with Claude Desktop. Again, Wiz, this isn't the only use case. There are many, but this is a good starter one. Over to you.
Yes. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to share the screen here. It's going to be a big one. And there we go. Boom. Okay. So the way we're going to look at this is pretty straightforward. We are going to, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this, first of all. So we're going to have the, basically this conversation with Claude, right? So you should commit to memory that my name is Chris Alexiak and I've been given the nickname The Wiz by my co-founder and CEO, Greg. I love D&D as well, right? Now, typically, if I try to do this in Claude between sessions, it's not going to remember who I am or anything that I've told it. So what we want to do, though, is build or use a tool that helps us, get this memory. So the way that we're going to do this is through, of course, Arcee AI's AnyMCP. Now, the way that we set this thing up is pretty straightforward. We're going to go through that to set up a new tool in a second. But you can see here that I already have this endpoint running. I have the endpoint as status ready. I have the payload that I need to connect it to Claude Desktop. And so we're pretty much good to go. All you have to do to get these spun up, by the way, we'll just come back to our endpoints. We'll go to our new endpoint and we'll go UVX. Let's say we wanted to add this time server, which is just going to allow us to understand, what time it is, something that LLMs classically fail at, right? All we have to do is come down, find the specific install string. We need to make sure that we can figure out if this is UVX or if this is NPX. In this case, we see that it's UVX. So we come back to Arcee, AnyMCP, we go to UVX, we paste in this package. We don't need any specific arguments or environment variables, though you can imagine you can add them if you need them, like an OpenAI API key, etc. We click Create Endpoint. You'll see that it does some spinning for a moment, and then it's going to boot into Booter Drive the MCP server, which is going to be available to us to add now to Claude Desktop. Okay, very cool. Very cool. Again, we're given this payload directly. What we need to do, though, is generate an API key. The way that we're going to generate API keys is by navigating to our API keys window, which is going to take us to Conductor. And once we're at Conductor, we can create a new API key. Let's just call this one like, time v1. We're going to create the API key. We're going to get it here, and then we're going to copy that to our clipboard. We're going to come back to our endpoint for our time endpoint here, which is going to have our connect information, right? And again, you can see all of your endpoints available listed here with their status. There is some limit to how many you can have active at a time right now, between 3 and 5. Basically, once we get this payload here, we're just going to add this to our config. So how do we add it to our config, right? Well, first of all, we can go to our settings in Claude just by navigating to the file menu, then settings, and we're going to go to developer, and we're going to click on edit config. Boom. This is going to bring our config file up. I've already got it open in Cursor. And what we're going to do is we're going to come to our tools, and we're going to add this new payload. We're going to rename this, to like time. And then we're going to come to here, and we're going to paste in our API token. You can steal my API tokens for the next, few minutes, but I will be rotating them as soon as the screen goes away. So sorry. Once we've saved that, we can go ahead and update Claude. Now, again, we've already done this process, right, for our endpoint that is to do with the memory. So this is the server memory server, which you can see is based on here, which has this little knowledge graph. So when I say, this is my nickname, this is who my co-founder is, what I can do is I can actually commit this to memory. And this is going to be leveraging that tool that I set up on AnyMCP to create a little knowledge graph associated with the things that I've asked it to remember, which is great. And now when I go to a new Claude, window, even though typically this behavior is not supported, I can use that tool to look up new or existing information that's in my memory so that I can answer this question with the context for my knowledge graph. Very straightforward stuff, but it's useful, right? Claude having memory across sessions is a powerful, pattern. You can see with OpenAI addressing this pattern directly. What we're going to do now, though, is close down Claude. I'm going to bring it back up now that we've added our time server. Our time server is going to be available to us when we go to File Settings. In Developer, we should see the server time, which is great. We do. And then what we're going to do is we can actually go to our settings and our integrations, and we can see the integrations we have, as well as looking at their tools. So with time, we can look up the tools and see exactly what tools we have. We can set different permission levels for, how we wish to be asked about when we can use our tools. And then we can come to Claude and we can ask things like, what time is it? Is it right now in Toronto? And, LLMs famously bad at this question. Through the use of MCP servers, they're going to be able to give us a response that is technically true. It is indeed 1:46 p.m. Again, these are simple servers, but the idea is it's very easy to add them to Arcee MCP, and we can start using them. There's a few things to think about here, which is that right now it's not like you can just add arbitrary MCP servers to AnyMCP. That's something that they're working on. But for right now, there's a list of allowed MCP servers, which should become visible to us in the short term. But that's where we're at today. For right now, there's a ton of really popular, really excellent MCP servers that you can integrate with AnyMCP very easily, and they, quote unquote, just work. Yeah, that's it. AnyMCP. They're MCP servers, but you don't got to deploy them locally. The only small caveat here, very, very tiny, is that you do have to make sure you've pip installed AnyMCP and it's available on your path. If you're in Windows, if you're on like a good operating system like Mac or Linux, you don't have to fret so much about this. But for Windows, there's a very small extra step of making sure you've exposed that AnyMCP to the global path. But that's really it. I mean, basically, you can spin these endpoints up. They're spun up for you. You can interact with them through any MCP client. In this case, we're just using Claude Desktop because why not? And that's the thing. So excellent, excellent workflow. Before I send you back to Greg, I'm going to ask you, of course, to like and subscribe to the video and et cetera, et cetera. Ring the bell notification. We're live every Wednesday. We love doing these events. And there you go. I'll send you back to Greg with that.
All right. Thanks, Wiz. And we're going to go ahead and wrap up after we switch the screen over here. And, in conclusion today, we'll talk a little bit about use cases with the team here and then take your questions from the audience. We saw that AnyMCP allows us to deploy MCP servers to API endpoints. There's two primary patterns we're going to use. We're either going to deploy a server locally and then publicly. We'll find a great one. This is the current status of AnyMCP, as was just mentioned, and just deploy it to an endpoint and expose it for other people, including ourselves, to use. MCP servers are not just REST APIs. It's my favorite quote, combination of quotes from Abhishek today is sort of MCP is an API that runs APIs, but it's more than just a REST API. So chew on that, guys, and let us know what you think in the comments. And then our use case is kind of an IDE that exposes the docs we need to help folks like you out there become AI engineers in 2025. What's your use case? As we get into questions, we'll field the few that are in the YouTube chat. Please do feel free to ask your questions, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and throw your questions in the chat. I want to bring up the whole squad here for discussion before we get into audience QA. This is about use cases, guys. I think people want to hear more about use cases. So, what are your customers doing with AnyMCP today? And what have they done with MCP servers in general? So let's talk AnyMCP first. Abhishek, then let's go to MCP servers in general to Lucas.
Yeah. Anything you want. Like if your MCP server is not supposed to access local systems, so I don't think this was mentioned during the talk, but like any MCP servers, obviously they are running remotely, so they won't be able to access your local system. Anything except that, any other kind of MCP servers you can deploy using any MCP, and you can use them anywhere. So it's more of a convenience thing, and available to multiple devices. So if someday cloud starts supporting MCP servers on your mobile app, then it's very useful, because you won't want to run those servers on your phone, right? Or if you're traveling or something. So and you can share it with your team members, as you mentioned earlier. So these kind of use cases I see. I don't have like a list of MCP servers that you can use, because literally we support thousands of them right now, and we are expanding it to custom and MCP servers that you can write. And so the possibilities are like limitless.
Oh, too many possibilities, Lucas. Break down some use cases for us. I'm going to go ahead and get us all up here.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one that I think MCP and just integrations in general help solve, and something that we've been focused on internally as well as a lot of other companies, is there used to be a world where if you wanted to take like a Llama 2 or a Mistral 7B and have it do like invoice processing, and it had to be in your environment, not hitting OpenAI or Claude, like you had to train it to do that. You had to specifically go out, train it to do that, collect the data, make sure it worked with your stuff. These models, both ours and the other ones being released, Quinn, Llama, they're getting so good that you don't have to do that anymore. You just have to give them a good system prompt, and you need to give them access to tools in order to do that invoice processing. So MCP does solve a problem of it makes those integrations standardized, much easier to build tooling around, because instead of trying to support arbitrary API specs that might be different from every company, like you're building towards one spec, and it makes adding, say, a QuickBooks API and then a Google Docs API much easier, because you're just building towards a single standard. So yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless, but especially when it comes to like scheduling, giving these models access to Gmail, so it can, or Google Calendar, so it can see like what's happening for you today. Then it can go out and use a website like a Brave Search MCP to get info about all the people you're meeting with, and then summarize those and give that to you in like a Google Doc at the end of the day. It makes it way simple.
Yeah. Okay. So, Wiz, I'm kind of getting from this, maybe if you have multiple tools you're trying to hit, maybe just collecting them into an MCP server is something that might make sense for builders coming up in the game. Or at what point does it start to make sense versus just giving an agent access to tools?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the classic. I mean, we could have a 4-hour discussion on this exact point, right?
Maybe
this is normal software engineering questions. When should we make a class? When do we go beyond just helper functions or utils, right? And the idea is, if we have a number of different tools that are associated with a specific service, right? A number of different operations we can do with a specific service, right? Grouping them that way into an MCP server can be very useful. Absolutely, right? But it's the same discussion about when do we step up this layer of abstraction. And it's really the same reasons we would in traditional software engineering. We need to share the code with other people. We want other people to use our services. And this is, I think, when that MCP server is useful. Like Lucas and Abhishek already mentioned, right? Like the motivation for GitHub to build their own MCP server is so that people can use GitHub through MCP. That's it's the same reason they built the GitHub CLI tool or the GitHub, Python SDK. It's a way that people can leverage their tools in using the standards that developers expect in current year, whatever year it happened to be.
Love that. Okay, let's go ahead and get to audience questions. Dino, well, great to see you in the chat here today. Let's go to Dino's first question. Do you see the role of messaging middleware as a loose decoupling between apps and MCP clients and servers? and kind of moving to event-driven agents. Who wants this one? What do you guys think?
I will comment on this from a high level, with the preface that I am like a researcher first, software developer last. So, but from you're getting into a world with this question where I think that you're getting into when agents are communicating with other agents, like you're getting into this world where a trigger happens, that spawns an instance of a model, it then communicates with like another agent. You're getting into this world where like MCP is like the first step. The next step is like, even Google announced that that's a completely different one, agent to agent protocol.
Yeah, we're covering that.
So yeah. I mean, it's you're getting into this world where like MCP is a part of a much larger suite of protocols that enable, even Microsoft called it on Monday, like the agentic web.
That's right. The fabric. Yeah. Anybody else have comments on this one? Okay. Let's head to the next. Dino, we're going to get your other question here. Do you see much value or adoption in exposing prompts via MCP? How about Abhishek? You got any thoughts on this? Any good examples to share?
Prompts. I mean, from what I know and from what I've seen, prompts I see as shortcuts. So you have like a prompt to, let's say, summarize. You don't have to write that prompt again and again. So I think these are shortcuts and examples on how the tool should be called.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much any MCP tool you expose to a model, there will be at least a description explaining like when the model should use that.
Yeah.
And that is kind of a prompt. If you were to just use the prompt, like there are definitely several, and that Taskmaster example I used way earlier is a good example of, you can basically, you can make a model adhere to a structure, and to some degree those might just be prompts. So I think it's definitely, if you're trying to scaffold a model and have it work in a very specific order, I definitely think there's advantages to that.
Interesting. Okay. Black Current 07, is the context on the client side or the server side? How about Abhishek? Is this clear?
Yeah, the question is clear. We don't store anything, so it's on client side. We don't store anything on the server side.
Yeah. All right. Easy. Let's see. Joe McDermott asks, what's the general trigger that determines when to use MCP and when to answer without it?
That's model reasoning. Like that is, there's a few ways you could do it. And the way I usually use my MCP tools, I love using the Supabase one because it simplifies a lot of Postgres management for me, is I'll tell it, use the Supabase MCP tool to make these schema changes. And then it knows, I mean, that's very blatant. Obviously the best, and kind of ideal workflow is like, you just say, hey, I want to make these changes to my schema. And then it goes, okay, well, I need to do that. I also have access to Supabase. Let me call that, that's where it's perfect. But I think for a lot of these, and especially if you're doing like agentic chaining together, like you should be very explicit. Be like, use this tool to do this thing.
Okay. Yeah, there's so many possible trailheads. We're running out of time here, guys. I want to end with Angela Chapman's question. And this is, are there any security risks or concerns? I know this is something we're actually kind of chatting a little bit about before the event here. Abhishek, as you're sort of like architecting this tool, obviously this is something you're thinking about. How are you going to like mitigate security risks and concerns for enterprise as you try to roll this thing out to more and more customers at Arcee?
I mean, like so for now we have, like, as I mentioned previously, we have like 1,000 MCP servers that you can use, and we have used many heuristics to evaluate them and see like if many people are using it, then we should probably support it. And that's why a random MCP server is not supported yet. We will do that in near future maybe. But I think like for enterprises and the security risk, if you're using an MCP server, which is it's like using an open source software, right? Or like any software. So it should be up to the enterprise to determine if it's safe for them to use this code, because it's at the end of the day, it's just a code, right? It's like a Python script or yeah.
Anytime you're
So,
doing arbitrary code, you need to vet it properly. So
That's right. That's right. Okay. Final thoughts on that, Wiz? You totally agree with everything they just said? That's basically it.
I mean, listen, MCP is not ready for prime time in
MCP?
enterprise
Okay.
without a
Not ready.
lot of additional work. It is. There are a lot of security risks that they already outlined. The process is you just like every
Yeah.
piece of code that goes through your organization, someone's got to do the risk analysis and management. We're just because it's fancy and it's got models involved doesn't mean that again, it's the same workflows we've always had. This time it's just called MCP instead of pip install whatever package you want.
Okay, because I heard Enterprise SaaS was dead forever because MCP was taking it over. Okay, all right, guys. Abhishek and Lucas, how can the audience get in touch with you? What's the best way to contact you, and how can they follow your work at AnyMCP? Abhishek, you first.
yeah, LinkedIn or Twitter, X.
LinkedIn or X. Okay.
Yeah.
Follow at Abhishek the core on LinkedIn. We'll drop the link in the chat here. And then Lucas, what's the best way to follow what's going on
you
at
can
Arcee and follow you?
find me at Lucas at Arcee.ai if you want to get in touch via email. Obviously, Arcee.ai is our website, and then my personal Twitter is Lucas Atkins with a 7 at the end.
That's right. Flying under the radar on the socials. I like that. But growing. Thanks it's great having you back, Lucas. It was amazing having you, Abhishek. We really appreciate your insights. And, we look forward to seeing you again next time, following the journey from here.
Thanks for having us.
And then Wiz, AnyMCP, that's a wrap. We'll see if the MCP servers continue to gain more traction. Folks, if you want to hear more about MCP, you want more MCP events, smash the chat and let us know. Wiz loves doing MCP server events. We'll spin up as many as you guys like. Wiz, thanks for your insights. Thanks for the demo. See you next time. All right, that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you for joining us for AnyMCP, talking about deploying MCP servers to API endpoints. If you're not yet part of our Discord community, you should jump in and start building, shipping, and sharing with us today. It's a great place to meet other like-minded, aspiring AI engineers and leaders, and we're in there building, shipping, and sharing every week. Also, we've got our primary educational acceleration product offering coming up, the AI Engineering Bootcamp Cohort 7. This is going to be the biggest, baddest, most international cohort yet. We've got an EU-specific cohort and a North America-specific cohort. We're going to have an amazing group of folks together. If you're interested in accelerating your application development in just 10 weeks, you've got to have some prerequisites and you've got to submit the application and do the challenges. But you can get in, you can get your entire team in. We still have plenty of spots available. We're launching next month, June 24th. And if you'd like to learn for free, check out our new self-paced home page on our website. We've curated a ton of easy to work through tutorials. If you're just getting started in the game and you're not yet ready to really, really grind for 10 weeks and accelerate, but the opportunity space for AI engineers has never been bigger. Now's the time to get into it. And we really, really look forward to supporting your journey through YouTube and beyond. Next week, we're covering the agent to agent. We're covering the Google Agent Development Kit. So join us, same time, same place for that. In 2 weeks, we're covering the agent to agent protocol. We'll talk more about some of the other protocols that are up and coming beyond MCP. It's getting wild out here, folks, and we got to track and version control each and every protocol as they come up. That's it for today. Of course, until next time, keep building, shipping, and sharing, and we'll do the same. We look forward to seeing you next week on YouTube for Google's ADK. See you next time, guys.